Hi friends, welcome. Here we are discussing real stories told by real people. Today we have a story about a man who loved his wife and didn't even realize that his wife was bringing some man to their house. Let's see what happens. The morning sun gently penetrated through the blinds, creating a warm light in Jason Williams' bedroom. He slowly woke up, enjoying the tranquility. Nearby, the noise of his 8-year-old son, Elliot, playing could be heard. They were ordinary sounds, but they always brought him joy. Jason, a tall and fit man with short dark hair and piercing green eyes, stretched, then got out of bed. He pulled on a t-shirt and jeans, calling his son. "Elliot, it's time to get ready for school." A moment later, Elliot burst into the room. His blonde hair was disheveled, and his eyes were shining with joy. He was holding his favorite toys in his hands. "Good morning, Dad," he exclaimed happily, jumping onto the bed next to Jason. Jason smiled and ruffled his son's hair. "Good morning, buddy. Did you sleep well?" Elliot nodded vigorously. "Yes, very good." They went down to the kitchen together. Jason was pouring his son's cereal with milk when his wife, Beth, came into the room. She was a slender woman with brown hair and brown eyes. She looked especially elegant in her business suit today. "Good morning, Jason," Beth said, bending down to kiss her husband on the cheek. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you ready for a new day at the office?" Jason smiled. Beth rolled her eyes, but with a smile. As always, marketing never sleeps. Jason laughed with her, feeling grateful for the life they had built together. After breakfast, Jason and Elliot left the house and got into the car. On the way to school, as they drove through the familiar streets of their quiet neighborhood, Elliot suddenly spoke up. "Dad, I don't like the second dad." Jason frowned at his son through the rearview mirror. "What do you mean, buddy?" Elliot lowered his eyes and said softly, "The man who comes when you're not at home. He talks to his mom a lot." His son's words left Jason worried. He tried to stay calm. "I'll talk to Mom, okay?" Elliot nodded, and Jason smiled again, although his thoughts were far from that moment. That night, after Elliot fell asleep, Jason decided to talk to Beth. They were sitting at dinner when he plucked up the courage. "Beth, I need to ask you something," he began, putting down his fork. Beth looked up, her eyes full of curiosity. He took a deep breath, choosing his words. "Elliot said something this morning that bothered me a little." Beth frowned. "What exactly did he say?" "He mentioned something about the second dad. A man who comes in when I'm not at home and talks to you a lot." Beth's eyes widened and she laughed, her laugh melodious but a little nervous. "Jason, Elliot must have made a mistake. There is no other man." Jason stared at her intently, looking for signs of a lie, but her face expressed only bewilderment and a slight sneer. "If you say so," he finally replied, smiling tightly. "But if something is going on, I need to know." Beth covered his hand with hers. "Trust me, Jason. There is nothing like that." She kissed him, and Jason tried to calm himself by inhaling her familiar scent. But a deep sense of unease had already crept into his soul. The morning turned out to be gloomy. Jason felt his thoughts returning to the conversation with Elliot and the strange words about the second dad. He couldn't get it out of his head, even when Beth was saying goodbye to him with a smile before going to work. He watched her leave, feeling a little uneasy. Her elegant image, brown hair neatly styled, a strict business suit, usually made him proud. But something was wrong today. After Beth left, Jason decided to check her bank statements. He sat down at his computer and logged into online banking. He started scrolling through recent transactions and noticed some strange expenses for expensive restaurants and hotels. This alerted him. In the afternoon, while Elliot was at school, Jason decided to go to Beth's office. He wanted to talk to her colleagues and find out if anyone had noticed anything unusual. He knew it might seem intrusive, but the desire to find out the truth was stronger. Arriving at the office, Jason stopped at the reception. A sweet girl with short hair and kind eyes met him. "Hello, how can I help you?" "Hi, I'm Beth Williams' husband. I would like to know if you have noticed anything strange in her behavior lately," Jason asked cautiously. The girl frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't divulge such information." Jason nodded, understanding her caution. He decided to try a different approach and approached one of the employees who looked less busy. "Hi, I'm Jason Williams, Beth's husband. Can I ask you a few questions?" he began. A young man with the name Greg written on his badge nodded. "Of course. Have you noticed that Beth spends a lot of time with any particular client? Maybe with someone named Nolan?" Jason asked, trying to sound casual. Greg thought about it, then nodded. "Yes, she does spend a lot of time with him. They often leave together after work." Jason felt his heart tighten. He thanked Greg and left the office. "There were a lot of thoughts in my head." He decided to talk to his neighbor Henry to find out more. After returning home, Jason went to Henry's house. Henry was an old friend and neighbor, as well as a former policeman. Jason knew he could trust him. "Henry, can I talk to you?" Jason asked, walking up to him. Henry looked up from his gardening tools and smiled. "Of course, Jason. What happened?" Jason told him about his suspicions, about Elliot's strange words, and what he had learned in Beth's office. Henry listened intently, his brows furrowing deeper and deeper. "Jason, I noticed a man who came to your house when you weren't there. Even have surveillance footage," Henry said seriously. Jason was shocked. He asked Henry to show him the notes. Henry brought him to the monitor, and Jason saw an unknown man enter and leave his house in Jason's absence. This confirmed his worst fears. "Thank you, Henry. I appreciate your help," Jason said, feeling his anxiety turn into determination. Now he had proof. He knew what to do next. Jason sat on the porch of his house, reflecting on what he had learned. Henry's surveillance footage clearly showed that an unknown man had been in his house. It was unpleasant to realize, but now he knew what to do next. The next day, Jason decided to meet with Nolan. He knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy, but he needed to hear the truth. He called his friend Ben and asked him for help. Ben, always ready to support his friend, agreed. In the morning, Jason and Ben went to Nolan's office. They waited in the car, watching the entrance. At 8:15 a.m., a black sedan parked and a man in an expensive suit got out. Jason clenched his fists, feeling the adrenaline rush through his blood. "That's him," Jason said softly to Ben. They got out of the car and approached Nolan. The latter, noticing them, stopped. "Mr. Hayes, we need to talk," Jason said firmly. Nolan raised his eyebrows in surprise, but nodded. They went to a nearby cafe to discuss everything in a private setting. When they sat down at a table, Jason immediately started a conversation. "I know that you are dating my wife. This has to stop." Nolan turned pale, his eyes darted. "Look, it was a mistake. I won't do it anymore," he muttered, looking down. Jason clenched his teeth, trying not to raise his voice. "You are destroying my family." Nolan looked humiliated. He raised his hands in a gesture of reconciliation. "I understand. Excuse me, it won't happen again." Jason looked at him, looking for signs of a lie, but Nolan seemed genuinely contrite. "Okay," Jason finally said. "I believe you, but if it happens again..." Nolan nodded vigorously. "It won't happen again. I promise." When Jason returned home, he knew that the next conversation would be even more difficult. He waited for Beth, feeling the weight of the upcoming conversation. When she entered the house, he met her in the living room. Beth, we need to talk, he said, trying to keep his voice even. Beth looked at him anxiously. What's wrong, Jason? He pointed to the laptop on the table. Watch for yourself. He launched a surveillance video showing Nolan entering and leaving their house. Beth turned pale, her eyes filled with tears. Is this true? Jason asked, his voice shaking with pent-up emotion. Beth lowered her head, her lips trembling. Yes, she whispered, but it was a mistake. I won't do it anymore. Jason felt his heart bursting with pain. He wanted to believe her, but the pain of betrayal was too much. A mistake, he echoed. You betrayed our family. Beth burst into tears, her tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Jason. I love you. Please believe me, it won't happen again. Jason stared at her in silence. He felt his world crumbling, but he knew he had to move on. We'll see, he said softly, turning away. We'll see. It's been a few days since Jason found out the truth. He often tossed and turned in bed at night, unable to sleep. Beth was sleeping next to me. Her breathing was calm. But Jason couldn't relax. He felt that something else remained unclear. One evening, Beth stayed late at work. Jason was sitting in the living room, nervously fingering his fingers. Elliot had been asleep for a long time. Jason knew it was time for a serious conversation. When Beth finally entered the house, he was ready. Hi, Jason, Beth said warily, taking off her coat. Jason stood up, his face tense. Beth, we need to talk. She felt his tension and froze. Jason took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. About us. About what's going on. Beth sat down on the couch, her eyes full of anxiety. Jason sat down across from her, his gaze serious. I found your phone, he began, trying to keep his voice steady. And I found something there that really bothered me. Beth turned pale. She lowered her head, her hands trembling. What did you find? She asked, although she seemed to know the answer. Jason took out his phone and showed her the correspondence with Nolan. The messages and photos spoke for themselves. You promised it would stop, he said, his voice shaking with anger and pain. But it continues. Beth covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I'm sorry, Jason, she whispered. I didn't mean to. I thought I could fix it. Jason clenched his fists, trying to hold back the tears. How could you? He asked, his voice full of bitterness. You betrayed me, you betrayed our family. Beth tried to reach out to him, but he pulled away. Please, Jason, give me another chance, she begged. I will do everything to fix everything. I love you. Jason got up and walked around the room. He stopped at the window, looking out at the street. I do not know if I can trust you again, he said quietly without turning around. You broke something important between us. Beth stood up and walked over to him, gently touching his shoulder. I realize that I made a terrible mistake, she said, but I'm ready to fight for our family. Please don't reject me. Jason sighed, feeling the weight of her words. He turned around, his eyes full of pain. It's not that easy, Beth, he said. You have to prove that you can change everything. And it's going to be a long way. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'll do my best, she said, her voice trembling. Just give me a chance. Jason nodded silently, but there was too much doubt and pain in his heart. This conversation was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. It's been a few weeks since Jason and Beth last talked. Life went on, but the atmosphere in the house remained tense. They tried to maintain a semblance of normality for Elliot's sake, but the wound of betrayal was too fresh. Beth was doing everything she could to restore trust. She quit her job, cut off all contact with Nolan, and tried to spend more time with her family. But Jason still couldn't shake his doubts. One evening, when Elliot was already asleep, Beth approached Jason, who was sitting in the living room with a laptop. "Jason, can we talk?" "What is it?" she asked softly. He looked up, nodded, and closed his laptop. Beth sat down next to him, her eyes full of determination and sadness. "I know I made a terrible mistake," she began. "But I'm willing to do anything to regain your trust. I love you and Elliot. You are my family, and I don't want to lose you." Jason sighed, his eyes staring into the distance. "Beth, it's not that simple. You betrayed me. And it's not just forgotten," he said, trying to contain his emotions. Beth squeezed his hand, her eyes full of tears. "I understand, but I'm ready to fight. I want to show you that I can change." "Give me a chance to prove it," she begged. Jason looked at her, his heart clenching with pain and hope. "I do not know if I can trust you again. But I'm ready to try," he finally said. "You have to understand that it's going to be a long journey, and I'm not sure that we will succeed." Beth nodded, her face lit up with a faint smile through her tears. "Thank you, Jason. I won't let you down," she said. As the days passed, Jason noticed that Beth was really trying. She signed up for self-improvement courses and started visiting a psychologist. They started going to family counseling together. Gradually, step by step, they tried to regain what they had lost. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Beth turned to Jason. "You know, I'm grateful for a second chance. And I want you to know that this is really important to me." Jason nodded, his eyes staring at the horizon. "I'm also grateful that you're trying. It gives me hope," he replied. Beth took his hand, her touch warm and soothing. "We will manage. Together," she said softly. Jason looked at her and smiled. This moment was important to them. A new hope began to emerge in their hearts. There were many difficulties ahead of them, but they were ready to walk this path together. It's been a few months since Jason and Beth started rebuilding their relationship. They worked hard on themselves and their family, but the shadows of the past still hung over them. Trust was slowly restored, and every small achievement was difficult. One evening, Jason received a call. It was his friend, Ben. "Hi, Jason. I need to meet you," Ben said, his voice strained. Jason agreed, and they agreed to meet at a local cafe. When he entered, Ben was already sitting at the table. His face was serious. "What happened?" asked Jason, sitting down opposite. Ben sighed, looked at his friend. "I found out something about Nolan. He's trying to rebuild his career, and it looks like he wants to return to work at your firm." Jason frowned, feeling anger rise in his chest again. "He has no right, not after everything he's done." Ben nodded. "I understand, but you need to be careful. He might try to contact Beth." Jason felt his heart tighten. He knew he had to talk to Beth about it. When he got home, he found Beth in the living room. She was reading a book when he came in. "Beth, we need to talk," he began, trying not to show his emotions. She looked up, her face anxious. "What's wrong, Jason?" He sat down next to her and told her about the conversation with Ben. "Nolan is trying to get back to work, and maybe he'll try to contact you," he said. Beth turned pale. Her hands trembled. "I don't want to see him. I want him to stay in the past." Jason sighed, sensing her fear. "I know, but we have to be ready. If he tries to contact you, tell me right away. We'll get through this together." Beth nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I promise. I won't make any more mistakes." A few days later, Jason received a call from his lawyer. He said that they had the opportunity to hold Nolan accountable for interfering in his personal life. Jason agreed to meet with a lawyer and discuss the details. They had drawn up an action plan and prepared all the necessary documents. When they got home, Jason told Beth about his plans. "We will fight, for our family and for our future," he said. Beth hugged him, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you, Jason. I know we can handle it." A few more weeks have passed. They were getting closer every day, learning to trust each other anew. Finally, the day of judgment came. Jason and Beth were sitting in the courtroom holding hands. Nolan looked tense, his face was grim. The judge listened to all the evidence and ruled in favor of Jason and Beth. Nolan was forbidden to approach them or contact Beth. As they left the courthouse, Jason felt a huge weight fall off his shoulders. He hugged Beth, feeling their hearts beating in unison. "We did it," he said, smiling. Beth smiled back, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. "Yes, we did it. And now we have a future that we will build together." They knew that there were still many difficulties ahead, but they were ready to face them together, with renewed strength and hope for a better future. So we have come to the end of this story. Please write your opinion in the comments. We will be interested to know it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new, even more exciting stories. We wish you good luck.